my name is Amelia and I'm an art teacher with Artists for Kids in the North Vancouver School District. Welcome to the Gordon Smith Gallery. This year we're bringing you the AFK ArtReach video series, and in this series we share artworks and art activities mostly inspired by the theme of play and by the artworks that you see in the gallery around me. And the art activities that we share with you in this series can be carried out at school, they can be carried out at home, and mostly outdoors. And we post these videos every other week on the AFK website. This week I'm going to share with you the artwork of two Canadian artists, Josie Papialuk and Jack Shadbolt. And inspired by their artwork, we will create drawings of birds. And we'll consider the following question: how can we develop our skills in drawing birds through practice and through play? We'll begin by looking at the artwork of the Canadian artist Josie Papialuk. He was an Inuit artist and he lived in Nunavut, which is in the most northern part of Quebec. And he created drawings, prints, and sculptures, and in his art he represented humans, animals, stories, and he also often used humor. And his artwork revealed a keen sense of observation. He developed a way of communicating in his art both visible landscape elements and also invisible elements, which included things like the temperature, or wind, or sounds like birds chattering, or the movement of humans and animals. Now look closely at this print. What do you notice about the birds that are depicted? Are these all the same type of bird? And are they all traveling in the same way? And how are they connected? How are they arranged in this image? And what kind of journey do you think they might be on? This print is called All Kinds of Birds Flying North in Spring. So what does this tell you about the journey that the birds are on? We know that many migratory birds fly to northern Canada and spend their summers there and then leave. So what do you notice about the marks, colors, and shapes that are between the birds? It's possible that these shapes and marks between the birds represent different aspects of the environment, both the invisible aspects and visible. So this might include the rain, the snow, the wind, or maybe even things like rocks or mountains. I'll now share with you an artwork by the Canadian artist Jack Shadbolt. Jack Shadbolt was originally from England and he moved to Canada with his family when he was very young. He lived for many years in Burnaby. And in his art, he was often inspired by his experiences fighting in World War II, his experiences traveling, and also his love for and his concern for the natural environment. And he created paintings, drawings, and murals. Take a look at this drawing of birds by Jack Shadbolt. Here we can see how Jack Shadbolt was closely observing birds and practicing drawing them from different angles. How many different kinds of birds has he drawn? And what kinds of poses has he drawn the birds in? And how would you describe the kinds of lines that Jack Shadbolt has used to draw these birds? How has he arranged these drawings on the page? And what do you think Jack Shadbolt was looking at as a reference when he was making these drawings? We could see this drawing as a kind of study, a way of practicing drawing birds. Perhaps he was preparing to create a larger work, a painting or a mural, in which he was planning on incorporating bird imagery. It's interesting to see these kinds of drawings by well-known artists, as it gives us a kind of behind-the-scenes view into their practice. It shows us the practice and discipline it takes to develop one's artistic skills. And it reminds us that drawing is a skill that has to be honed and developed through practice and experimentation. To practice drawing birds, I've come outside to do some sketching. And I've managed to find a spot where I can watch some ducks in a pond. And luckily there are quite a few ducks out right now. And I brought with me a few pieces of 8.5 by 11 inch white paper. You could also use a sketchbook if you have one. And I've also brought a hard surface to draw on and a couple pencils. I brought a couple darker pencils. One's a 6B and one's a 4B. and I also brought an eraser. And now I'm going to watch the ducks and start by making some loose sketches on my piece of paper. I'm looking closely at the shapes that make up the ducks' bodies, and obviously they're not going to hold still and let me make detailed drawings, so I'm just making quick, loose sketches, again trying to capture some of the shapes that make up the ducks' bodies. And as I'm drawing, I'm scattering my drawings across my piece of paper, and some of them are overlapping. And I'm looking closely and also thinking about being playful and loose in my mark making.
Hi, my name is Emily Neufeld, and I'm the studio technician here at Artists for Kids, as well as a practicing artist. Today we'll be sketching some birds, and I'm going to show you a few of the techniques that I use and the materials that I like, I've chosen hummingbirds to draw today. So today I'm going to demonstrate for you 3 different drawing techniques, sketching techniques, based on these black and white printouts of hummingbirds that I've gathered from the internet. You can use any bird you like, and you can print them out or just use a book. The first sketch will be looking at motion and trying to capture motion using pencil on paper. The second one is looking more at the texture and shape of the bird, and I'm using a graphite ground and then pencil and eraser into the ground. And the third one is again kind of looking at motion, but also trying to capture a little more of a gesture of movement from the bird using India ink and a bamboo brush. The materials you will need will be pencil and eraser. You can use a blending stump if you have one, and maybe a white CONTE or white China marker is nice too to add some white. Then I have graphite powder here that I use to make a ground, and just any white paper is fine, although if it's a little thicker it handles the ink better, because the third activity will be India ink on paper, and so you need water container and India ink and a bamboo brush, or any brush is fine. The main thing to think about with hummingbirds is that their bodies sort of are very still and stationary while their wings whir about, and they move in these almost like robotic way. So I really want to reflect that in my drawing. So I'm thinking about the stationary nature of the torso while the wings are flying around in a flurry. So for that reason, I've chosen to draw this bird overlapping. So the image of the same bird, I'll overlap the torso, because the torso doesn't change all that much, and just kind of add new wings to each iteration of the drawing, and maybe the beak position. And I think I'll be able to communicate the sense of movement by doing that. So I start off drawing the loose shape of the outline of the bird, keeping it very general. I'm just doing the loose outline. I'm using a 6B pencil here so that it shows up on the camera, but I usually would start with a B or a 2B so that I don't have to press very hard, but I do a very light line to begin with. And then as I'm sketch each bird in, and then I will go back into the drawing after I've sketched each bird loosely, and I will do more of the outline of the bird, kind of varying up my line and putting a more permanent line. And I'm thinking always about the mark making and trying to make the marks beautiful as well, not just focusing on pressing it evenly the whole way around. I'm not a computer. It's a hand with muscle, and I think that varying up the line and really thinking about your mark making really takes your drawing up a notch. So here I'm adding each wing, adding in a bit of shading, trying to keep the hatch lines moving in the same direction, looking at each bird separately and overlapping, and where do the colors overlap and the dark patches overlap. Now I'm going to try to do a couple more sketches where I really try to economize. So I try to use as few lines as possible and still manage to capture the movement of the bird and the shape of the bird. So how can I do it with the fewest shapes possible? So I'm just going in, looking at the images and trying to just put lines down thoughtfully and carefully, and just get the outline of the bird, the gesture of the bird, the movement of the bird, really looking at the lines that really show its movement. So with this second drawing, I'm going to start off with some graphite powder, which is often sold just in hardware stores. It's a lubricant for different machinery, so you can often get it at a hardware store or at an art supply store. It's really messy, and I really like it because you can make kind of an even ground. First, I'm starting off making a ground out of graphite powder. Now I'm starting on a medium gray tone instead of starting on white. So everything that goes in will be either darker, or I use an eraser to make it lighter. So it's kind of a more interesting way of looking at it, where you're really looking at the shapes and the light and the dark areas. So I first go in with a pencil and get the outline of the bird, kind of where I want it placed. And now I'm going in with the side of the pencil to add some darker areas. And now what I'm doing here is I've got an eraser, and it's nice, pristine, and white, but my dirty hands will make it not very clean quite quickly. But I'm going in and finding the white areas and then erasing out the powder to get the paper back to white. And I use the edge of my paper to clean off the eraser so that it again is doing white and not just smearing gray. So you'll kind of notice as you erase it, it'll pick up the dust and it'll get dirty. And so you have to clean it off by scrubbing on the side of your paper to kind of get it a clean again, and then attack again with the eraser. And then again, going back in with the pencil to make some darker areas and some lines and paying attention there. So my third drawing here, I'm going to use India ink. And what I have is I have some quite watered down India ink that's like very pale, and then I have a medium watered down India ink. Neither of these are straight, so I mix one with half and half water. The other one is like 1/6 India ink and 5/6 water. So I'll start with the darker medium tone first, and again, this is every mark you make on the paper is permanent, so you have to be very thoughtful as you apply the ink. But I'm again looking at the gesture and the movement. And I love these bamboo brushes because you can press harder to get a thicker line or gentler to get a very thin line. So I really like using them because of just the dynamics that you can achieve with them. So I'm just outlining each bird, like giving that gestural moment, that movement line kind of to begin with, capturing their little bellies, each of them, and their tails, and then moving down. I really find that these hummingbirds, the one brush stroke for the beak is a very nice, quick gesture, and then the eye also helps you to like place the face. Once I've got each of them kind of the main gestural strokes, I'll go back with the more watered down ink and kind of block in some of the like shadowy areas. And I'm really being very free and careless almost with the ink. I'm letting it drip, I'm letting it pool, and I think it just adds a much more dynamic look to it when it's done. So I'm letting it drip down and pool, and I think it'll make a more interesting drawing in the end. And then with India ink, you can always go back after and put in another. Once it's dry, if you go over certain areas, they'll kind of get a little bit darker, and you can kind of like vary up the tones. You can go over, like I've done drawings where I go over the drawing 6, 7, 8 times, so the shadowy areas get darker and darker, and you just create much more value in the drawing, where there's darker darks and lighter lights and all these different stages in between. This one here is just 2. I just have the darker tone and then that lighter tone that I've gone over 1 time. But you can even see the way that it pools and kind of moves on the paper. It kind of gives you an interesting kind of line. And again, this could have been really interesting over a ground, like a charcoal medium gray ground, and then go in with an eraser first and then go in with India ink. That always is interesting. Like, you can mix and match all of these techniques together. So once you've finished your drawings, you can share them with a partner or even with a class. You can put them up on a bulletin board, and everybody can walk by and share their observations with each other. And you can see what things in the drawings are different, what's similar, what techniques have people chosen to use, and how has that communicated the movement of the bird or the attitude of the bird. And that's kind of an interesting thing to compare with one another, how your different techniques and materials that you chose to use communicated different things. I'll give you a couple of discussion questions that you can use either with a partner or with the whole class. You can ask each other which exercise they enjoyed the most, whether the outdoor or if you chose to do pencil or ink or any of the other techniques that you decided to try. Which one was your favorite? And how did you bring play into the process of drawing these birds? So did you try to think about it when you were choosing your materials, or was it during the actual drawing process? Where was play in there? I know for myself, I really thought about play with the India ink and being not very precious with it, but trying to really play with how just like the least amount of lines can really communicate something in the drawing. We here at Artists for Kids would love to see any artwork that you create. We always get very excited in the office to see how people have interpreted the lessons and used them and the artwork that they've created. So you can email us here at the office at Artists for Kids, or you can post it on Instagram with the hashtag AFK ArtReach. And we would love to see anything that you make. Thanks very much and hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.